Hey, I'm Mike Gilliam, and this is Let It Rip. Wow, it hardly seems possible, but the Biden and Harris administration is wrapping up its first 100 days in office. Now, 100 days is an important benchmark used to measure the performance of a new administration for a number of reasons. One is to see if campaign promises are being kept. Another is that it's generally believed a new administration has about 100 days to get to work and put their agenda in place before the honeymoon is over on Capitol Hill and it becomes harder to get bills passed. This administration came in with a lot of troubling issues to tackle, from COVID-19 and vaccine distribution to racial justice issues, police reform, the economy, and much, much more. We'll take a look at how the Biden administration is doing on all fronts. This is Let It Rip. Here to help us grade the administration's performance on COVID-19 and all of the other very important issues, we have a great group. Professor Emmanuel Egbe is the chair of economics at Medgar Evers College. Milton Alamati is an editor for Black Star News and a professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. And we also have a student affairs educator at LaGuardia College, Kazembe Batts. Welcome to all of you. Milton, let's start with you. They often say, get COVID right, and all the rest flows from there. How has Biden done over this first 100 days with his COVID response?
Just tremendous. It's like night and day, day and night compared to the previous president, Donald Trump. I mean, he's letting the professionals and health experts really take charge with the daily briefings, not from President Biden, but from people that actually know what they're talking about. And I think that did a tremendous amount in terms of getting people more confident. You can't have a president speculating that a potential cure could be injecting people with disinfectant as a possible cure. So the narrative was all over the place under Donald Trump. Now we have a consistent narrative, a recognition by the president himself that this indeed is not only an American, but a global pandemic. And that if we don't exercise maximum effort, we will not be able to contain it. And he made a promise that within 100 days, there would be 100 million vaccinations. He's exceeded that. That target was elevated to 200, and they've met that target. But the best thing is now we actually have consistency in the narrative. And I think that to me is the most remarkable thing. But you know what? It's not actually really remarkable. We now have a sane president. And that's why, compared to the previous president, you would say that it's something remarkable. He's doing what should have been done all along.
Emmanuel, what do you think?
I would say he has done a tremendous job. The first thing is to have the vaccines distributed very rapidly. And he has not only met his target, he has exceeded his target. But it's important that, as he said during the campaign, whatever a president says is very, very important. For President Trump to make the wearing of masks something that simple, a political statement, was totally wrong. And now America sees a president that is complying with what the medical scientists have said and have recommended, which is that we protect ourselves and protect our neighbors from the infection. And the COVID is quite a stubborn infection. I mean, it goes away one day and then it comes up the next time, if not in the United States, it comes up in some foreign country. And the President Trump's one of the wrong things he did was to sever a relationship with the World Health Organization, which was doing a good job of ensuring that there was a worldwide coordinated effort to control the COVID. And so in many respects, in fact, in all aspects, President Biden has done a great job of dealing with the COVID crisis.
Kazembe?
Both professors, they're right on target about how Biden is 1,000% better than our previous president. I like the fact that he campaigned on getting shots in arms, and he's way ahead of the timetable for that. His messaging, the way he has encouraged folks to take the vaccination, And now I see more people, including people that I know, who are more anxious to take it. So I think he's doing a great job on that. Like the professor just said, on an international level, though, I say a prayer for India in particular. I was watching something about that just a little while ago, but I would like to see the excess vaccination that's in the United States shared with the so-called third world, the Caribbean, Africa. If the United States has excess vaccination supply, then that's the only moral and ethical thing to do. The World Health Organization and others have called for pharmaceutical companies to step aside from the profits that they want to hoard the vaccinations and not allow it to be distributed to the so-called third world.
Yeah, it's almost amazing to look at it and say, wow, like now we're talking about excess and doing things like that, donating to other countries, when not too long ago, we wouldn't have even thought about that at all.
Thank you.
And I think he said that he would do that. Emmanuel, what about the economy? How has he done so far for the Black and brown community on that?
The COVID did really create a shock in the economic system, but this was not like a structural shock. It was just a shock because we had to essentially quarantine ourselves and try to avoid the spread of the infection. It has had a more devastating impact for minorities, especially for Blacks, for women, and women of color or women of any shade. And one of the reasons is something that we call occupational segregation. You see that Blacks and people in lower income occupations are more likely to be in the first response, to be like working in grocery stores where they have to face the public.
Frontline workers.
Yes, frontline workers. And that kind of what you call occupational segregation, which economists have studied way back up to the early 1970s, what happened is that these are the people who are less likely to be able to work effectively from home, because you have to be in the supermarket to serve people. You have to be in the hospitals. They are the janitors who have to keep hospitals clean, who have to keep workplaces clean, wherever people have to be at all.
Milton.
We were 3 times more likely to get infected, 3 times more likely to die. And now there's talk that the economy is recovering. But if we look at history, historically, it's always been consistent. Unemployment in the Black community has always been double that, or almost double that, of the white population. If you look back even in the 1950s or 1960s, for as long as they've kept these statistics. So going forward, I think the administration has to look boldly and do something really radical so that we change that consistent narrative of structural Black unemployment. We can't afford that, because if you are dying at 3 times the rate of the white community, imagine the devastation that does to the families who are now deprived of an income worker. So I'm actually looking forward to the president's infrastructure project. And I hope that goes through $2.3 trillion, because that's going to create a lot of employment. And I'm hoping that a disproportionately favorable amount goes to Black communities.
Okay, Kazembe, you're going to be next here. And this one is a question for all 3 of you, okay? On a scale of A, B, C, D, and F, how would you grade the Biden-Harris administration on their work in the first 100 days? Kazembe, you go first.
I would give them a B++. I think Biden is doing a good job. Of all the presidents that I can remember, including Obama, I think that he's doing the best job being progressive. Of course, everything starts with the word, and then actions have to follow. But his appointments, including very multicultural, and he has some Black people in strategic positions, his position on policing, his position on the new Green Deal, his position on taxing the rich, rejoining the climate treaty, condemning Ethiopia and Ugandan governments, the way that they've been moving. I think that he's doing a great job. The only thing I don't like is the deportation of Haitians. which has increased. And I'm surprised and disappointed about that. But nonetheless, I would give him a B++.
Mhm. Emmanuel?
I would even want to go a little beyond and maybe think about an A minus. The first thing is that he took the bull by the horns. The COVID relief package, which ironically President Trump, thrust into his hands by increasing the checks to 1,400 in addition to the 600. Now his infrastructure bill, but also the fact that he has reversed quite a bit of President Trump's, I would say, ill-motivated initiatives, using his executive orders and taking the bull by the horns and using the procedures to move legislation. I would say he's been bold. That boldness began from the time that Trump was challenging the election. He just went about his business, setting up his cabinet, setting up his administration, in spite of Trump's agitation.
Yeah, I think he's shown leadership. Milton,
Yes.
what do you think? How would you grade him for the first 100?
I agree totally with both my colleagues, and I would give him an A minus. And I endorse all the elements that my colleagues also enumerated in terms of why he deserves these high grades.
Good conversation. A big thank you to Professor Emmanuel Egbe, chair of the economics department at Medgar Evers College. Thank you. Our other guests are going to stick around as we get into a huge issue confronting all of us: police brutality and reform. Former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin is now a convicted murderer. His videotaped killing of George Floyd brought the issue of how Black and brown people are treated differently by police into the living rooms of white America. No longer could people question whether or not there were two systems of justice in the United States, with minorities forced to worry about the issue of deadly force. After kneeling on George Floyd's neck for nearly 10 minutes and killing him, Derek Chauvin was convicted on all 3 counts, including second and third degree murder and manslaughter. And he's in jail, awaiting a sentence that could put him away for a very long time. But one case doesn't solve the problem. In the midst of the trial, Dante Wright was killed in a Minneapolis suburb when Officer Kim Porter shot him during a police stop gone bad. And on the day of the Chauvin verdict, at least 2 others were killed by police. 16-year-old Micaiah Bryant shot and killed by an officer responding to an altercation in Columbus, Ohio. And Andrew Brown Jr. shot and killed by a sheriff's deputy executing a search warrant in North Carolina. That discussion in just a minute. Stay with us. I'm Mike Gilliam, and this is Let It Rip.
You're watching CUNY TV, the City University of New York.
Welcome back to Let It Rip. I'm Mike Gilliam. The killing of George Floyd ignited protests not only in Minneapolis, but across the country and around the world. The image is something no one is likely to forget, with Derek Chauvin kneeling on Floyd's neck for nearly 10 minutes. Many say his conviction may be a sign that policing is going to change. Let's discuss. We're joined by Victor Dempsey, whose brother, Delron Smalls, was shot and killed by off-duty NYPD officer Wayne Isaac back in 2016. Victor is now a national community organizer for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. Milton Elamati is an editor for Black Star News and a professor at John Jay College. And Kazembe Batts is an educator at LaGuardia College. They're all still with us. Victor, let's start with you. Did you expect Chauvin to be convicted of all 3 counts?
Wow. I did not, Mike, to be completely honest with you. And unfortunately, the only reason I didn't expect all 3 charges to be found guilty of is just because of the history and what we've seen in previous cases. I did watch the trial thoroughly. I think the prosecutors did a fabulous job in trying that case. But again, unfortunately, as you all may know, I went through my own trial in my brother's case. And as well as the prosecutors did, I was let down there. So it's a lot when you get your feelings up with emotion to know that you're going to get some justice and it doesn't happen. So I think this time around, I was very cautious with my emotions in regards to how I think the verdict will sway.
Mhm. Milton, do you see this as a point that's going to make change in policing, or is this just one case?
It's one case, but it's a big case. And I say this because it got global attention. And I think that's what made the difference. It got global attention and it sparked this international and national protest. And the consistency of the coverage reminded people of how brutal this public execution was. And yes, the jurors said they were willing to be open-minded, but it's very difficult to be open-minded once you know that a so-called officer of the law pressed his knee on somebody's neck to deprive him of oxygen until he died. I think you can't remove that from your consciousness. I think because of a combination of things, the protest, the coverage, and now, as you've noticed, there's a lot more national coverage on all these other incidents that are ongoing that we in our communities have known for years that are occurring, but had been ignored by the so-called mainstream corporate media.
I also think that that tape, that videotape was so very, very important, because if you didn't have that tape, this might not have happened. The initial police report said that they arrived there and found him in medical distress.
I really wanted to interject there because, you know, you all brought up a major piece to a lot of these families' cases, including my family's. Not our cases, but the loss of our loved ones. When my brother was killed, it took 8 days for a video to surface that actually showed him being killed. This officer's original reports was completely contrary to the actual video itself. And 8 days later, for a video to come out that completely showed a false narrative from this officer,
right,
it was devastating to see that we couldn't even get accountability when we actually laid out the actual contrary to the original remarks to when the time the video was released. So sometimes, Milton, I like to say it's not enough. But what I will say, one layer that we did forget as to, you know, George Floyd's justice for his family, the pandemic.
Yes.
Unfortunately, this pandemic has torn a lot of families apart, but it also exposed a lot of this nation that we currently live in today, America.
Kazembe, let me ask you a quick question here.
Yes.
What do you make of the fact that Daunte Wright was killed while Chauvin's case was going on in a courtroom just 10 miles away?
What I make of that is it's part of the history and the contemporary reality of policing in this society. So that happened, and it may have happened someplace else at the same time. I just think it's just part of the American way of life, unfortunately. But as far as this trial, I was not surprised that he was convicted on all 3 counts for the reasons that my colleague said, the coverage and the fact that there were worldwide protests. But one more reason, the blue wall of silence seemed to be breaking down. You had cops testifying against, you had the medical examiner, you had the whole state apparatus, basically, or the local apparatus turning on this police officer as they should, because it's obvious what he did was wrong. So I was not surprised that he was convicted, although I think that what has been said about the George Floyd policing bill and the need for us to keep the pressure on, to go back to your original point, that someone was killed right when this was happening. We have to keep the pressure on. I go back to 1983. That's how I met Reverend Daughtry and Charles Barron when Michael Stewart was murdered. That was 30 years ago. And so I've been in courtrooms, and I have never really seen the system turn on an officer like this as far as a murder case. Maybe with corruption, but not with a murder case. So I think we have to keep the pressure on. Now is the time to turn the pressure up. Biden, the president, has said that he seems to be in sympathy with and empathy with the families who have lost loved ones. He supports the George Floyd bill. He has called for consent decrees that Trump ended, that Obama had when he was president. So everybody, this Zoom, when we get off of this Zoom, wherever we go, now is the time to finally get police brutality and police murder under control. And the best way is right now is the George Floyd policing bill.
Can I jump in really quick? I'm so sorry, Mark. I really want to say this. My good brother Sharik played a video on Facebook the other day that just rattled my soul. In that video, I just a few words were said that just turned my everything upside. In that video, I'm watching the good brother Malcolm X, and he's talking. And he says, if you're not ready to clean your house, you don't deserve a house. If you're not ready to clean your house, you don't deserve the house. Now, we can imagine what we're talking about in this instance, but Brother Kasimbe literally just said exactly what I've been feeling. The system turned. The system, that blue wall of silence turned in this trial, and it meant a lot. But I do also want to give power to the people on the ground because they didn't stop.
That's right.
And I will point out something else. A lot of folks forget. July 4th, 2016, my brother was killed. Mind you, this is one day he was killed before Alton Sterling in Baton Rouge. 2 days after Philando Castile was killed in St. Paul.
Wow.
This was 3 kills back to back to back. But the nation only knows certain names. Why?
Wow. Because
of that silence, because of that systematic piece to it. And a lot of times when this blue wall comes up and defends these officers, I'll be the first. I don't think I'm the first to say it. A lot of times it's not for the officer, it's for the department. Mm-hmm. So when I hear the system change, Minneapolis's mayor, the governor, everyone flipped from top to bottom. Mm-hmm. And that's what started that change for this one piece of justice for families across the nation.
So let me ask you, Victor, how do you fix this problem in police departments, though? Is this racism baked in? How do you actually get in there and fix it?
I truly believe it's the culture of law enforcement. It goes back to it predecessors myself in my tenure, right? It truly goes back. Law enforcement was not invented to keep Black people safe. Right. It truly wasn't. This is the nature, this is the core root of law enforcement at its very best, unfortunately. This is why we're in the middle of a trial waiting a verdict and another young person is murdered within minutes. This is why this week alone, we've lost 5 folks to police. So yes, what has to change for me is, just like my colleague said, especially Milton, it starts at the top. I did not take that quote from the good brother Malcolm X. If you don't want to clean your house, you don't deserve it. It starts with the president. Enough. New York State currently has the chokehold ban for Eric Garner. That's not enough. Folks are dying nationally. One bill, one law change in one city does not stop folks from being murdered on the West Coast or the East Coast or North or South. It has to be federal things change, even Department of Justice. You know, I tell folks all the time, you hit them where the money's at. Mm-hmm. All this defund police talk, divest, whatever you want to call it, that also helped break down this wall of silence. Nobody wants to lose that money. Right. But now I'm sorry, I'm going to probably use the term that folks may have known, but Title VI is federal funding towards law enforcement departments. Department of Justice and the president himself can make a decision as to withhold federal funds from law enforcement entities that don't have it together.
Okay, that's going to have to do it. I want to thank our guest, Victor Dempsey, whose brother Delron Smalls was shot and killed by an off-duty NYPD officer back in 2016. Milton Alamati, an editor for Black Star News and a professor at John Jay College, and Kazembe Batts, an educator at LaGuardia College. Thank you to all of you. We're going to take a short break, and I'll be back with some final thoughts. I'm Mike Gilliam, and this is Let It Rip.
You're watching CUNY TV, the City University of New York.
Welcome back to Let It Rip. I'm Mike Gilliam. Now for some final thoughts. As the Biden administration marks its first 100 days in office, we've seen a major change from the previous administration. I think what we're now seeing from the White House is true leadership. Gone are the tweet storms of the past and the bullying. There's a new tone coming from the White House, and it's refreshing. It feels like there's leadership on COVID-19 and vaccine distribution. More and more Americans are getting the jabs, and I didn't think we would have this many people vaccinated under the old administration until sometime next year or even later. Sure, there are some resisting everything that the Biden administration says or does, but that seems to be right around that 37% of people who supported the 45th president, no matter what he said or did. Biden appears to be tackling all of the things he promised during the campaign, and he seems to be sticking to his guns. He showed real leadership on the George Floyd murder case, reaching out to the family after the verdict and assuring them that it mattered to him. No one would have expected that from the previous occupant of the White House. I think one of the biggest changes is that as a person of color, you no longer have to get up each day wondering what proposed policy or tweet is taking aim directly at you, or creating an atmosphere where you feel you have a target on you. For all of that, so far, I give the Biden-Harris administration a strong thumbs up. That's all for now. I'm Mike Gilliam, and we'll see you next time on Let It Rip.